Hello everyone, and welcome back to Epic Randomness. My name is Branson, and today I thought I'd tackle the video everyone else made 6 months ago. Which starters will be in Pokemon Legends ZA? Or more, which starters are most likely? We're all just waiting for ZA news at this point, and making predictions is fun, so I thought I'd take a stab at it. The trouble with guessing what starters will be chosen is, even though we've had one Legends game, one game is not enough to establish a pattern. And even then, Game Freak has been notorious for breaking patterns in the last few years, so it's not as easy as picking 3 starters. Part of the question is, will the starters have regional variant final evolutions like the Hisui starters, or will they choose to instead give them mega evolutions? First, we should eliminate any starters that are almost completely unlikely. First are Rowlet, Cyndaquil, and Oshawott. Since they are the Legends Arceus starters, there's no reason that they would be chosen again, unless they were going to be the starters for each Legends game, which would be a really weird choice and kinda disappointing. The next I'll eliminate are the Gen 9 starters. Since our last main series Pokemon game was literally their game, they're probably not going to choose them for ZA. They're too recent. The first set of options, which might seem boring, but is a pretty high possibility, are just the Kalos starters, Chespin, Fennekin, and Froakie. But I think if they are going to choose them, they will have mega evolutions. Some say that because of Ash Greninja that won't happen, but in Scarlet and Violet, Battle Bond Greninja no longer changes forms, it just gets a stat boost. Even in Pokemon Journeys, Ash's Greninja returns, and in flashbacks, every scene that originally had Ash Greninja was replaced with regular Greninja. They're removing Ash Greninja from existence. This could very well be preparation for Greninja getting a Mega Evolution. Whether or not the Gen 6 starters are who we are choosing at the beginning of the game, I do believe that they will be getting Mega Evolutions, no matter what. Next, we'll look at what's probably the most popular selection of mixed starters, Snivy, Scorbunny, and Piplup. The reason people choose these are because of how French they are. Superior is based on French royalty, and Empoleon is based on Napoleon Bonaparte, who eventually lived and ruled France, and Cinderace is based on soccer, or football, which is very popular in France. In fact, France won the last World Cup. I quite like this selection. Well, sort of. I don't really like the Snivy line. I don't think they look like very good snake Pokemon, at least compared to Ekans and Sandaconda. But I like Empoleon just fine, and I really like Cinderace, who would be my choice. The one argument I've heard against these choices, funnily enough, are they're too French. How are they going to make French-based Pokemon more French with regional variants? I think this is a valid point, but I am actually going to push back on it and offer up 2 solutions. The first one is simply, they might just do Mega Evolutions. With Mega Evolutions, they don't have to increase the Frenchness, they just have to enhance the Pokemon, and they can do that however they want. The second solution I got by looking at Hisui and Samurott. What is original Samurott? A samurai sea lion. What is Hisui and Samurott? A dark samurai sea lion. Samurott was already based on a Japanese concept, and when they brought Samurott to an actual Japanese-based region, they didn't make it more Japanese, they slightly changed its Japanese inspiration. That means they could do the same thing with Snivy, Scorbunny, and Piplup. Maybe they could base Superior off of different aspects of French royalty. I'm not exactly sure what, considering Superior just slightly looks like royal French clothing. So maybe they could choose a different style of clothing, or even turn the idea on its head a little, make it based on an old French peasants. Actually, looking at it, it seems that Superior is likely based on King Louis XIV of France. A lot of its dex entries reference how it uses solar energy a lot, and Louis XIV called himself the Sun King. So maybe they could choose a different French figure. Empoleon they could turn into Napoleon in a different outfit? Maybe not the strongest argument. Or they could base it off a different important French historical figure, like Marie Antoinette, or King Louis something rather. Or, I don't know a lot of famous French people. Not well anyway. Sure, Empoleon literally has most of Napoleon's name in it, so changing it to a different person might seem not possible, but Alolan Sand Slash exists, so I'm not taking anything off the table. That does mean that both Serperior and Empoleon might have the same similar idea for inspiration, being famous French people, but oh well. Then Cinderace could pretty easily be changed to a different sport. I've heard roller skating a suggestion, since in X and Y they had roller skates instead of bikes. Roller skates were actually patented in France, and in the modern day, skating is popular in larger French cities, like Paris. Rugby is also popular in France, and I could definitely see Cinderace being turned into football, but American, basically. Okay, that's not fair to rugby. But yeah, I think this set, or at least a set like them, are pretty likely, seeing how they could take the chance to turn their inspirations on their heads. But now let's finally move on to other starters. I think I want to talk about the Kanto and Hoenn starters. Both sets have Mega Evolutions, so if the ZA starters are just getting Megas, any one of them doesn't seem likely. They're not going to choose 3 random starters and have one that already has a Mega. But there's also another problem layer. They could give them regional variants, but then that would mean whichever Kanto or Hoenn starter that's chosen to have a variant couldn't Mega Evolve. The only way you could get a Mega Blaziken, for example, would be by an in-game trade of sorts, or by putting a regular Pokemon in from Pokemon Home. And I just don't think that Game Freak is going to make a Mega like that just unavailable. I guess I should bring up why a lot of people think that the Fire starter will be Torchic, and it's because roosters are kind of France's thing. There's the Gaelic rooster, which is a French symbol. It came about back in the Roman Empire, when the people who live in what is now France were called Gauls. And the word in Latin for the Gauls was Gallus, which was also the same word for rooster. It's literally in chicken's scientific name, Gallus domesticus. The Romans would use Gallus as a way to make fun of the Gauls. Ancient people were weird. But eventually the Gauls, or at least the eventual people of France, started using Gallus, or rooster, as a point of pride for them. They were roosters, symbol of courage and bravery. Clearly, calling someone chicken wasn't invented yet. And while that is a great reason for Blaziken to be the fire starter, I don't think it'll work. I do not think it makes sense to choose a starter which has Mega Evolution, if they're giving the starters Megas. But if they're giving the starters regional variants, then they aren't going to deprive everyone of getting Mega Blaziken. And I guess we'll stay on fire starters and talk about Litten. Or really, Incineroar. Incineroar is a pretty popular and pretty dreaded option. First, the reason why people think it's likely is because of Le Chat Noir. Basically, black cats. Black cats in Paris are considered symbols of artistic freedom. There's also the Matagot in French folklore. That's a spirit that usually takes the form of a black cat. And there's also the very famous Le Chat Noir Cabaret in Paris, which is a place of the arts. Here's the thing with Incineroar. It's probably the strongest Pokemon in the competitive scene. So the idea of giving it a Mega is immediately terrifying. But there's 2 things. If they make it a regional Incineroar, there shouldn't be too much of an issue. It'll have a different type, different moves, a different stat spread, and most importantly, a different hidden ability. Well, in Legends Arceus, there were no abilities, so Legends ZA could very well follow suit. But once it's moved to a new game, it won't have Intimidate as a hidden ability. Probably. The second point is, a Mega Evolution doesn't necessarily mean that Incineroar will be better. Mega Garchomp is actually considered worse than regular Garchomp. They made it hit harder and bulkier, but they made it much slower, which doesn't really help Garchomp much. Incineroar isn't strong because it hits hard, though it can. It's strong because it's really annoying. In every competitive format since its release, Incineroar has had one damaging fire move, like Flare Blitz, then U-Turn, Parting Shot, Knockoff, or Swords Dance. It's meant to lower attack, live a hit or two, hit his opponents with an annoying move, and dip. If Incineroar gets a Mega Evolution, they're most likely going to increase its attack the most out of all of its stats, because Incineroar looks like a hard-hitting Pokemon. And not only that, but it'll have an ability that isn't Intimidate, probably, which is most of the reason that Incineroar is any good. Even though ZA might not have proper abilities for regular Pokemon, I do think that Megas will have some sort of ability feature. So, while I don't love the idea of having Incineroar, I think it could work without the competitive scene having a meltdown. The last few really worth mentioning are Totodile, Tepig, and Grookey. In 1984, there was a crocodile found in the Paris sewers. Could be a point of inspiration. Might seem a little specific, but Rillaboom is based off a British commercial of a gorilla playing drums. Speaking of Rillaboom, Paul de Chalieu, the man who discovered gorillas, or at least the European who confirmed gorillas existed to Europe, was French, if you couldn't tell by my pronunciation attempt. So there could be something to a French gorilla. And with Tepig, well, pig is a pretty popular dish in France. I've heard the idea of a chef Embor, that'd be cool. And the rest of the starters, honestly, I could see them picking one just for fun. We have Chikorita, Turtwig, Chimchar, Popplio, and Sobble left. And there's not really a strong argument for any of them, really. Maybe French opera siren thing for Popplio and French spy for Sobble. Who could say? I feel like the least likely of these is Chimchar. I just don't think it'll fit. So, did we find our answer? Of course not. This is speculation. We don't know until it's announced. Hopefully when I release this video, it won't immediately be obsolete. I think either the Kalos starters or a selection from Snivy, Scorbunny, Litten, Piplup, and Totodile are the most likely. And I think that's about it. Please tell me in the comments below who you think will be the starters for Pokemon Legends ZA. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.